Include now. Brought to you by Even Break.
In this episode, we are providing a trigger warning because we'll be talking about mental health and the topics of self-harm and suicide may come up in conversation. Hello and welcome to another Include Now podcast. On today's podcast, we are talking about the really important subject of mental health, and specifically mental health in the workplace. When we are filming this episode, it is World Mental Health Day. So happy Mental Health Day to all of our listeners. This subject is an area that I'm really passionate about personally. When we hear mental health, it means, I think, a lot of different things, I should say, to a lot of different people. I think one thing that is important to recognise is that everyone has a mental health. And when we don't look after our mental health, and we're not in spaces and environments that are conducive to positive well-being, then people are impacted in their day-to-day life. In fact, it's estimated that 12 billion working days are lost every year, at least, due to people needing to take time to look after their mental well-being. I am honoured to have today's guest join me today. She is an incredible human being I've followed and known for a long time now, and not wanting to embarrass Poppy, I genuinely believe Poppy has tangibly changed the way we as a society see mental health here in the UK. Without further ado, I would love to welcome Poppy to today's podcast. And Poppy, is amazing for our listeners if you could introduce yourself and your current role and how you got into the line of work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Adam. And over and above all the work stuff, I'm just honoured that we've been friends, I think, for about a decade now.
Yeah.
Well, happy World Mental Health Day to you too.
Thank you.
Yeah, do you remember? Because you first came and saw me when I was running Mental Health First Aid. Yeah. And we talked about, changing the world then, and I think we have a little bit. So I'm Poppy Jaman. I am the founder and vice chair of an organisation called the MindForward Alliance. And our vision is that every workplace should be good for people's mental health. And we work, in order to achieve our vision, Adam, we work with multinational businesses, so big companies that are recognised brands that have presence all over the world. We also work with organisations like the Bank of England and other companies that, like Lloyds Banking Group, who are just UK focused. But the point is, we want to work with the world's largest brands and help them become mentally healthy environments, get their leaders talking about mental health and advocating for mental health. And in so doing, we will influence the entire supply chain. So if you take a big company like, I don't know, HSBC, 250,000 employees, 66 countries, if they start doing good mental health, creating a positive environment for work for people where people can flourish in every way, we start to see a trickle effect in societal change. Because people like you and I, people expect us to talk about mental health and disability and injustice and equality, and because that's what we're known for. But when leaders that are typically not known for talking about health are talking about health, it lands in a different way, it reaches a different audience. So that's what MindForward does. We work with large organizations in the private sector, and we help them develop their mental health strategy. But prior to that, I mentioned Mental Health First Aid, and that's where you and I met. So I was the founding CEO of Mental Health First Aid, and I was a civil servant before that, and I was a community development worker before that. And I guess if there's a job title that I feel most proud of is my community development roots, because I'm not a clinician, and I'm not a psychiatrist, and I'm not a social worker, and I just love building communities, because I feel like that's where the power every changes. If 3 or 4 of us get together, and then we can advocate and get another slightly bigger group of us together and be respectful of each other's perspectives, we can genuinely foster change, and communities is where it's at. It is my belief.
And you're phenomenal at doing that. And I think if you just take mental health first aid England, which is only one side of the impact that you've made, certainly when I'm working in organisations and you see the mental health first aid England logo and first aiders in some of the organisations, that must be such a great feeling to know that, and you talk about trickle effect. It's not just the number of mental health first aiders in the workplace. No. It's the number of people those mental health first aiders have supported. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, so I think I always have to say this because it's true, is that I get all the credit for Mental Health First Aid. I was just the founding CEO and a bit gobby. Like the real talent and the skills were the team that sat behind it. Like it was just, but you know, Fanula Bonner was our COO, and she now runs ICAP, which is England's only, which I think it's the only Irish counselling service in so she's now gone over to do that, and she's a clinical psychiatric nurse by background. She was amazing in that journey. So there were other people who, like, there was a core team of probably about 8 of us that community. But I do like taking the credit for it because it's great. But one of the things I've got to tell you, Adam, that I love is when people try and sell me mental health first aid. I love that. I love it because, and that to me really demonstrates the fact that mental health first aid has changed the DNA of our country. And I remember the early courses being written on my kitchen table with my youngest child throwing up because she'd come home from school with a bug, and I remember those days, and I remember Adam thinking, oh, you know, when this lot grow up, you know, and this was, I mean, she's 23 now, so at the time she would have been about 4 maybe, but when this lot grow up, a decade from now, I hope that their employers put mental health first aid on their induction program and go, this is what we expect you to participate in at some point in your career journey. And and that was a real dream. That was like, I'd remember in the, you know, like when you do the storytelling and presentations in the early days, trying to sell an idea that nobody wants to buy. And I'd always put a picture of the kids up and say, the vision for mental health first aid is this, that it is so normal that every workplace, it's standard to be trained in mental health awareness, but it felt so far-fetched a dream then, and it totally is real now. And actually the kids have all being offered mental health first aid as part of their, whether it's their volunteer jobs or whether their works, or even actually one of my cousins is now a doctor, and he had it as part of his doctor training in Cardiff. So it is, it would be a career highlight, but personally, but I think, that second part of your question, why and how did you get into this? I feel strongly as a British Bangladeshi woman that of migrant family. So I'm third generation. Granddad came over and worked in the Merchant Navy for 26 years as part of East India Company, where all the Bangladeshis are either at in the Docklands of England, so either Liverpool or Brick Lane area, and that was part of all the spices and the cotton and everything. So Granddad was part of that movement, and that's how my family ended up here. But it suffice to say that actually the loneliness element of migrant communities, or loneliness full stop for any communities, is a massive causation of mental health difficulties. And that was very evident in my upbringing, in my parents, in my mum particularly, and not knowing what mental health was and how like you adjust as a child to fill in the gaps, right? So I had two younger brothers who aren't that much younger than me, but in terms of relationship, I definitely felt like I was the carer because of, the first person in the family that was speaking fluent English, for example. So all the doctor's appointments were on my shoulders, all the school appointments were on my shoulders. And not that you see it like that, but you adjust to fill the gap. And that takes a toll on your mental health as a young person and then as a young woman. And so I think for me, why mental health first aid and now MindForward Alliance, and why mental health has been a part of my career, it is my own lived experience. It's what I've observed in communities, in families, and the one thing that was missing was awareness and our confidence to talk about it. To be able to go, are you all right? Because I think your behaviour is a bit odd, Adam, and actually I'm wondering if you're feeling a bit sad, maybe even depressed, maybe even suicidal. Like, it's okay to have that conversation because suicidal ideation is normal. And that is what was so powerful about mental health first aid. And now the work that I've continued to do is mobilising people to have an open dialogue, and also removing the fear means that we can get support earlier. We can don't have to rely on our kids to fill the gaps if we are actually depressed, because we can access support. So there's so many little things that's complicated that you'll get that I'm probably not explaining well enough, but that's what mental health first aid did.
Incredible. Just in that, and I think that lived experience really is key in terms of enjoying society does better going forward. Thank you for sharing that. So one of our regular features is 3 questions in 3 minutes. So we'll jump into that now. And first question is, who is your leadership idol and why?
Right. So I don't idolise anyone. Is that a really arrogant thing to say?
I love it.
So I don't, and hear me out here. So I don't idolise anyone beyond like the crushes, teenage crushes on celebrities, right? When I was like into Bollywood films as a 13-year-old, and Shah Rukh Khan and Amitabh Bachchan was everything. Like beyond those, I think what's happened is, as I've grown up and understood the world from different perspectives, people's flaws are what make us unique and different and interesting. And so I guess what I idealize is values and personality traits. And I love, so my friend Vic, who I spent the weekend with, is, Vic uses a power chair for her legs, and she came to a sari workshop that I run. So I run what I call SareeNaSorry workshops, fun shops I call them, and the idea is that the opposite of depression is expression.
Yeah.
And if we can use the sari, which is one long unstitched piece of cloth, it's the most inclusive piece of a garment in the world, because it doesn't discriminate on gender or body size or anything.
Yeah.
Because it's all about the knots and ties. And if we can use the sari to help people to express, we might actually move a little bit closer from depression to joy. But that's the concept behind it. Anyway, Vic came along to one of my sari draping fun shops, and I was like, oh shit, I've never put a sari on somebody that's got a power chair for legs. Like that's Vic's description. My legs on my power chair. I was like, okay, so we had a great chat, and anyway, within 20 minutes she was draped in a sari, and what I don't do is I don't show anybody the mirror to begin with. So it's all about how you feel, how you holding this, how you holding yourself, and then we do the big reveal. And she saw herself in the mirror, and she said, I have been stared at all my life, and today I want to be seen because I look beautiful. Like, that just chokes me up. So Vic and that courage and vulnerability, yes, that's what I idolize.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and you should meet Vic, because she's bloody brilliant, lives in Brighton.
I love it. I think I want to come along to one of your fun shops.
You could definitely come to one of my fun shops.
That would be great.
That would be brilliant.
I would love that. So next question is, do you have a book or film that you would recommend?
So I struggle to sit still, so I don't watch much TV at all. But music is my thing, and I like to run, and which is a thing that I've picked up in sort of the last 3 months. I used to be a runner in my 20s, and then it all stopped. And Sona Jabrate is a kora player. If you haven't heard her, or if you haven't been to one of her gigs, everybody should go. She's her music is outstanding, and the kora is an instrument that's passed through lineage, and usually men. And so there's that history of the kora and who can play it and how it's passed down. So for her, being a woman who's actually world leader in kora playing is also amazing. So Sona Jabrate's music is something that I would suggest everybody just takes a bit of time with a glass of wine, maybe.
I'm going to definitely be doing that tonight, I think.
I'll send you a link.
That'd be amazing, thank you. And then the final question is, what is your go-to for self-care practice?
That's changed over the years significantly, and I think that's also a good point to make, Adam. Like, as we go through life, we are different people at different phases, and for women as well, there's key sort of hormone phases that you need to adjust to. So one go-to that's a given is connection and friendships.
Yes.
Yeah. So always. Work in my younger days was a go-to thing, so it's no surprise that some of the work that I've done has been so successful, is because work was almost a vehicle of self-care for me, because it was where I could channel all of my anger and my energy and my drive to create change. These days it's more about I've just mentioned running, so I've picked up running again, and music and theatre, actually. So, which I never thought I'd say, because I always saw the arts as something that's accessible by the privileged. You need to have money and time to go to theatre and shows. And also, as I was growing up, I never saw because of the areas that I grew up in. Like, I didn't see disabled people on stage. I didn't see black people on stage. I certainly didn't see Asian people on TV. And I was listening to a podcast on my last run. But is it Sanjeev Bhaskar, one of the guys that he's a brilliant comedian, but he was on Goodness Gracious Me, which is an 80s comedy for Asians. It completely was like, wow, that happened on TV, and we're taking the mick out of white people and how we're trying to fit in. It was just so well and cleverly done. But he was saying, you know, we used to get quite excited when we saw browned up and blacked up people on TV, because it was like, and I know now that's like a wow, like that's such a, but when there was the vacuum of nothing. And you saw someone that was pretending to be brown on mainstream TV, it was like, oh, that we exist. And the irony of that won't be lost on anybody, right? But it's, and it would be the same for people with disabled people. Is that when you saw people pretending to have a limp on stage, or, you know, and they weren't disabled at all, it was like, okay, this thing exists. It was, so for me, I feel like having the resources and the time at this stage in my life to indulge in the arts and actually go and see, you know, Bhangra show and artists, you know, who are in wheelchairs, and comedians who have got very visible disabilities. Like, I love all of that, and I think it's such a honor to be able to support that, and a privilege to be able to access that. So those are my current go-tos: running and trying to get out and do as much observing and watching people do cool things.
Amazing. I think it is important to recognise that our self-care needs will change, you know, lives, and being aware of that and being open to that, I think, is really, really important. So thank you.
What can I ask you? What's your go-to self-care practice?
That's really interesting. I think family and friends.
Family and friends.
Big time. I think I didn't realise until you said it. I think work to a certain degree is self-care for me. Maybe not always, but certainly being able to make an impact. I think that helps me.
Do you think, Adam, that's partly because not everybody, that's an unusual thing to say, your work is part of my self-care, right? But I do reflect on that sometimes, and let me just ask you another question. Like, do you think that sometimes because, like in my family, I was raised not to be a CEO. I was raised to be not heard and not seen, right? That was the stereotype of a young Asian Muslim background girl, right? And that, thank God, that's changing and changing in some parts of the world. But so for me, working was a privilege, because nobody in my family, no woman in my family worked outside of the home. Driving was a privilege. So my self-care was jumping in a car and remembering, bloody hell, like I can drive it. I've got my own car and I can go anywhere I like. Do you think that's part of why you and I have both cited work being a self-care thing?
I think it is. I think also probably being told I wouldn't be this, I wouldn't be that as a kid.
Yeah.
And that is a form of trauma, I guess. So I guess being able to say up yours to society for putting those limits on you is a form of self-care. So I think, I probably was told that I wouldn't work. I've been lucky enough to be a director in different organisations and build some amazing teams or communities, and I think that is, I think you're bang on. I think it is because society tried to limit my possibilities. Actually, I was thinking when you were talking about your friend Vic.
Yeah.
I'll share a slightly embarrassing self-care strategy, but it's a very good one because it works.
Go on.
So when I was younger, I could walk, and I walked quite differently. It was quite noticeable that I was walking differently to most, so by virtue it attracted attention. So I used to get stared at quite a lot. I think when you're 12, 13, 14, 15, that's quite a thing.
Yeah.
So I used to, in my head, tell myself that I was a famous football player. And that is why people were looking at me. And I just sit here now and laugh and think, oh God, that's really embarrassing. And I was telling the world, and it worked because it was a coping mechanism, I guess, for being in a society that would not get up for
difference.
Yeah.
I love that. So you convinced yourself you were a football player and the world was staring and admiring you. You were everybody's idols. Yeah. Bloody brilliant. I love it. I think we should write that up as a coping strategy for...
Which, as a 40-year-old now, it's quite an embarrassing thing.
I don't think you should be embarrassed of that. I think those are like golden nuggets that we should be sharing with the world and how we cope with... It worked. Yeah.
Can I just say, I don't do that now.
Oh, okay. you just now know that it's fine, right?
It's fine. It's absolutely fine. If it works, it's fine. Yeah.
But do you also think, like, the work being part of our well-being toolkit is so for me, my job is really meaningful and purposeful. Like my work has been. I'm not selling tobacco. I'm not it's not about how much money is in my bank account. It's totally about how much positivity I can do and what I'm learning along the way, and how I get invited to do stuff like this and hang out with cool people like you, and also get to learn like cool things about how you coped in your childhood. Like those are stuff that money can't buy. Yeah. And so the meaning and purpose of the people that I hang out with then become the thing that feeds me. And I think that's why work is also part of my well-being toolkit, because it's such a purposeful thing for me.
Yeah. And I can listen to you and talk with you all the days. So I love it. I wanted to just touch on stigma there. I think stigma, and you mentioned your parents, and when you're younger, talking about mental health was just not done. I genuinely believe that we have progressed a fair distance. I genuinely what I said earlier, when I think you have been a key driving force behind it and the communities that you work with. Do you think, can you see the change and quantify it, and how far have we still got to go?
Totally. I mean, I gave the example of the kids earlier, didn't I? And mental health being for training, first aid training being offered at work, and that being normal. If you look at, so for me, because my focus and lens has been workplace, I'll guess I'll point to some of the things that I think that have changed and that are markers for change, and then we'll come back to how much further have we got to go. But you know, in my time of just the last 10 years of setting up MindForward Alliance, which was previously known as City Mental Health Alliance, and I remember in the early days of setting up this alliance, we debated long and hard about whether we can call it Mental Health Alliance. Like, we were like City Mental Health, and it was City Mental Health Alliance, but Adam, because it was born in the City of London after the financial crisis, and now we're MindForward Alliance because we're global, because we've gone so it was like but I remember like big discussions. I think there was about 3 meetings on, can we actually use the words mental health in the title? So if we take that as and I remember very clearly going, we need to reclaim mental health. Like, you are all what the understanding of mental health in this room currently is poor mental health, is mental illness. It's the disabled elements of mental health. It's the homeless person on the street that we see that is talking to themselves, behaving erratically. That is the vision that the image that comes up in our heads when we're talking about mental health. And therefore we absolutely need to call this organization the mental health. We need to name it, because that's what it was. And then this debate went on to, well, we are talking about common mental health issues like depression and anxiety, and not psychosis and bipolar. And so we had to be very clear that working environments, people didn't want, understandably, the reputational damage associated with the word mental health. So imagine you're a massive health, a law firm, and the idea at that point was, well, if we're doing mental health so publicly, would we be considered that all the lawyers in this organization have got mental illness and therefore they're not going to be up to the scratch? So there was all of these really interesting fears that emerged from the organizations that we were working with. And yet now those same organizations have published their mental health strategy. They will often have they've reviewed their employee assistant programs to ensure that individuals that are working from them, and often the family members, are also able to access mental health services like counselling, for example. They've got mental health leave days in which people can take off without actually saying, I'm sick with a tummy ache, which is what used to happen when I was unwell in my 20s, and even though I was working in the civil service and mental health, they've got mental health awareness sessions, education sessions, from everything from dementia and how to support elders in for example, companies in Singapore and Hong Kong, where you've got multi-generational households still, and elderly parental care is very much part of the social structures in those markets. So you've got, and then of course line manager training goes without say, and mental health first aid is not the only thing out there. Actually, there are most of the big organizations that we're working with have developed their own very nuanced one, because each market, each sector, if you're a law firm, the need is different to if you were a construction company. So all of those are absolute markers for me that things have changed. And the number of, we did a recent survey, Adam, where we interviewed 12,200 people in 12 countries and employees, and asked them various questions around mental health. And and we've produced one report, and then we've produced 12 reports for each of the countries. So if anybody's interested, go to our website, MindForward Alliance, and have a look at it. But the big data points were 85% of people said that if their leaders in their company, their business, their organization talked about mental health, they felt like the organization cared. Motivation increased and desire to quit decreased. Productivity increased. So if you want a business case, like getting a leader to talk about mental health can increase productivity, and I think it's by 10%. So like it's significant.
Huge.
It's huge. But also you attract and retain talent. So it's from a marketing perspective, for an organization, if you really didn't even care, but actually you just wanted to look at it from a business case perspective, that data in itself, 72% of employees said that, or was it 60? Anyway, between 60 and 70% of people said that it was crucial that their employers talked about mental health. Now, young people are expecting to work in places where they should be treated well. So these are all really great indicators.
Considering your business case, because when we're talking to organisations, I think there's still this narrative that say people are less productive, mental health or less productive, but actually none of that is founded. When you look at the data that you said, there's huge business cases as if you invest in people and create spaces where people can see and use organisation care and want difference. Productivity is good.
Yeah, it's I mean,
higher.
but it makes perfect sense. Like, if I care about you, you're going to give more.
Like,
like, it's not that difficult.
Not rocket science. And I guess just before we move on to the buzzword, I just want to pick up on something you said, which is I think it's better, it's still happening. I still think people find it easier to say, I'm not going to work today, I've got a cold, I've got a stomach bug, rather than say, I'm not in the right space to be in work today. I guess how we continue to change that, how we continue to create spaces, more spaces where people can say, I'm just not going in today, I need a mental health day.
I think this is I think we've got a hell of a long journey ahead of us still.
Yeah.
And I think there are some countries like the UK where it may not feel like it at times, but we are ahead of the game. Australia has done a lot of work, and they've got a bigger history of longer time history of doing this. Their campaigns run much longer than we had it. But we are, when it comes to workplace mental health, the big workplaces in this country, the narrative in this country is better than most places in the world, and we are leading the way, which I'm really proud of. That's great to be going, I identify with this country and this is one good thing that we're doing out there. I think there's a bit of a weird narrative that's developing, which is the lack of intergenerational solidarity.
Yeah.
And let me just sort of explain what that means to me. But there's a bunch of us oldies, like there's the survey that we did 5 generations, so boomers to Gen Z. Anyway, like 5 generations. 5 generations. And what was interesting was 54% more than half the people surveyed said that they had experienced a common mental health issue, at the time of the survey or the month prior. And then when you broke that number down, majority were the younger generation. So in the 60s was younger generation, and in the 30s were the older generation. And then when you broke that down to why that was, the older generation felt that it was a private matter. Whereas the younger generation was like, actually, this is normal. I'm open to disclosing. And that again shows the generational difference and probably how far we've come in the last 20 years. But even in the 30s of disclosure for the older generation, it's not low, is it? It's not. It's more than a quarter of. So we've all got a problem here. We're all suffering together in this, and it serves all of us to get behind this. But I think that bit around some generations feeling like our health issues is a private issue and you should come to work and do your job and go home is still prevalent. And then with the younger generation, where there's so much more education, they're much more boundaried about what they will and won't do. They're much happier to walk out because jobs for life don't exist anymore. And the world is open to them, whereas in our generation, well, actually, can I get a job in this city? So I think there's a generational solidarity piece that needs to happen, which is us listening compassionately to each other. And I would say this, wouldn't I, because I'm biased because I'm in the older category, but I often say to my kids, like, I also need compassion from you. Like I used to identify as a black woman, for example, and the kids said to me, I'm not black, I'm brown. And I was like, I am a black woman politically and la, 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 la. I used to be a race activist and da, da, da. And then I listened and I realized that my black colleagues and my black friends have a worse experience. The darker your skin color, the more racism you exist. And actually, from that context, I'm very privileged. So then I was like, okay, I'm a brown woman. So I've now used that as my identity. Yeah. But when I'm with my black activist friends, we're all black, right? Yeah. So I think these nuances are really, really important. So with the whole mental health agenda, I think there's that as well, Adam, is that I feel like if I can be listened to compassionately and also some of my perspective being taken into consideration, not excused, I think we can have a more fruitful dialogue between the generations to go, how can we help each other? How can I help you recognize that you're a brown woman in the current state and not a black woman? And how can we make you understand that actually you advocating for mental health serves you, and we set up a new way of being in our families, in our work environments, in our schools that is kinder.
I just think sitting with that is just so powerful, and I think we just need to be kinder in our communities, within our communities, and the diversity within those communities. I wanted to kind of wrap up on a feature that we call Beyond the Buzzword, and this is something I'm definitely passionate and frustrated about. And the buzzword, I should say, is psychological safety. And I can see a smile on your face because I think you probably get to hear that word used quite a lot. And I guess that this feature is to unpack what is truly authentically meant by it, because I think in the EI sphere we get words that come in and out of passion, and they can mean everything and they can mean nothing. And what scares me is we hear leaders talk about psychological safety and then just not practice it or not embed it within the organisations that they work. So I'm really keen to hear from you. Is it just a performative word? Does it still have real meaning? And how can we really create spaces where people in the workplace feel psychologically safe?
Yeah, and I think if we zoom out a bit first, all of this stuff, all of the diversity, inclusion, equality agenda could be performative, couldn't it? And if we look at who's working, so I know, this is a workplace podcast, it's World Mental Health Day, the theme is workplace, but if we look at who's succeeding financially and status-wise in big organizations, it's not people that look like me and you, is it? So that probably is a measure of how, if I'm being kind, how difficult it is to create a change that moves away from success and winning looking like a certain person, right? So and society for over hundreds of years is geared up for that as well, isn't it? It's like, you know, who is the person that's going to be bringing in the most money? What do they look like? How do they speak? What's their language like? What height are they? You know, so much analysis has been done on alpha personality or whatever it is, like whatever the psychometrics. These are the and they're not people that look like me and you. So I think we can, if we start there as that's the context that we're starting with. I love psychological safety. I think if you can create an environment where people are willing to speak up about the things that they think aren't going right, then you also create the space for really brilliant ideas. Because if I can trust you to tell you that actually I saw someone in the team behave like this and you listen to that, then I'm probably going to bring you my wackiest idea and go, do you know what, Adam, I think I should run SareeNaSorry Funshops as my next thing to do, and this is what it looks like, and it's got so I'm going to bring you to you what my wildest ideas, because I'm not going to be mocked, I'm not going to be dismissed, and I'm going to be heard. And that is the simplest form of that's the benefit of creating a psychological safe environment. It's also there's a business case for it, you know. So if we are developing a new product or a new service, and everybody is so enamored by you that nobody is willing to tell you the truth that this new thing that you're doing is not going to land, and so you go ahead and invest in it, and there's a marketing strategy, and you roll it out, and then it's not landing. There's a cost associated to that, but also the embarrassing factor and the hurt to your status or the organization's. Like, there is so much, and actually all of that could have been switched off if we had a psychologically safe environment where you could test some of these ideas out. And in our industry, sorry, Adam. Go on, do you want to go? You're trying to get in. Go on.
I just think that, and people just won't stay.
Yeah.
So when you talk about a business case, recruitment and talent comes at a cost in terms of finding it, but losing talent because people don't feel safe is a huge business risk.
No, I think we're clearly both really passionate about psychological safety, aren't you? But you're absolutely right. Like, people won't stay, or people stay and become incredibly damaged and hurt and bitter people. Because the other thing I think about psychological safety is, how does an organization deal with... We'll talk about people leaving because I think that's important. We'll come back to that in a minute. But there's a thought in my head that let me just finish it because I'll forget it. If you can create an environment where somebody's made a mistake, because that's life, isn't it? Like, nobody's perfect. But it's how the company and the leader or the manager deals with that mistake.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if I'm now yelling at you and half the team has seen yelling in reality or in other ways being aggressive to you, that goes across the organization and gives a very clear message that this individual and this company is not a listening organization, and therefore if you speak up about sexual harassment, bullying, racism, or just that you're overloaded in work and you haven't got you don't feel like confident that you can say anything because your mistake isn't going to be listened to, you're going to be yelled at and humiliated, you're immediately creating a culture that is not going to allow you to learn and grow as an organization, and inevitably I just don't think you're going to be there in the long run. And if you do, you'll be branded as a ruthless organization, and maybe that's okay for some people, but I would suggest that most of us don't want that. I think the other thing about people leaving is it is really important, because I think there have been projects that I've been involved in. There was an armed forces project some time ago, and I think it's the only. I think I've only cried at work in a work meeting twice in my life, because I felt like, not because I was overwhelmed in a nice way, but because actually I was being shouted at. And it was an armed forces project that I was running many years ago. And for whatever reason, this person had decided that the partnership was not an equal partnership. And I'm really good at forming equal partnerships. But it's a hierarchical organizational structure that they had. And here came along this person who's telling us that we can roll out armed forces mental health first aid and it's going to change everything, and we've been around for 100 years and we know better, and all of that. You could, yeah, all of that. Anyway, I presented some data which showed that we were doing really well, and there I was thinking, nailed it, this is great, we're gonna. And what I got back was a barrage of questions around, well, what does that number mean? And who are you talking about when you're talking about the army? And basically instead of going, this project has been really successful, for whatever reason, this individual decided that this project was limiting for them because it was somehow showing them up that their work wasn't good enough on its own. We had added value. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But I remember her shouting at me, and I just was just completely froze in the moment, and then had to step out of the meeting and cry. I was like, wow, I'm a fully grown adult, and I just presented this amazing work, and what I got back was such a shocker and a surprise, because the psychological safety in that partnership and in that institute and in that person's line manager, well, she wasn't even my manager, was not there. And the impact of that was that project then died because there was 10 other people in that room who did not want to be the person that I was, sitting on the position that I had been sat on. So, and one of the reasons that project died is my organization, Mental Health First Aid, was the one that had made the majority investment in this. And I basically went, I'm going to free up my future from this, because this is not worth, this is not worth my integrity and actually my mental health. So I walked away. We did have a great event to celebrate the successes, and actually we brought in the people that had been impacted who told the stories, and interestingly that person didn't come to that event, but we made sure they knew all about how successful it was, because there's nothing like having a glass of shampoo bubbly in your hand and showing that killing people with kindness. But that aside, that project could have been so much more, but I walked away because I needed to free up my future. I also think we as leaders have a responsibility to work with those people who are repeatedly making mistakes, because it means that they're either not being supported in the right way, or they've been set up to fail in the first place, or there's another agenda, and actually having upfront conversations to go, where do you need to go next, and what can I do to help you? It is a really great way of fostering psychological safety and demonstrating that even if we part ways, we can do it in a way that is incredibly kind and respectful and supportive of each other.
For me, I could talk to you all day. I mean, good, and I feel really touched by our conversation today. We actually now so honoured that you have come on one of our first ever podcast episodes. So thank you from my heart, and it's always genuinely safe and impactful when I get time with you. So thank you so much.
It's been an absolute pleasure to sit here with you and be part of your podcast series. Thank you so much.
And to our viewers, if you found this episode enlightening, I think it's worth it. And please share within your communities if you want to learn more, please access our best practice portal. And until next time, take care and include now.